Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who, from the dark, came and found the souls of lords within the flame.
Tim Longo.
From the dark you came to find those souls of lords. You took a very, kind of a little bit outmoded form of air travel, I think, to find those souls of lords. We are starting a new series this week about Dark Souls. And should we give the preface now before we even talk about 2011?
Which one? Which preface as far as...
About 2011 being
a
little out of the ordinary for us.
Yeah, we just have to give that caveat and preface that this is an exception. Just so everyone knows, don't get your hopes up. We're not jumping to modern era games. This is definitely an exception. I think we debated Demon Souls versus Dark Souls, and Demon Souls is a little bit harder to play if you don't have a PS5 and things like that. So we, and Dark Souls is a little more accessible, but also or available. But also, I guess between the two is, sort of like Dark Souls is really the one that really blew up. So it seemed appropriate. Obviously, we're playing it because of Elden Ring. It seemed appropriate, and we reference it so freaking much.
Yeah,
because it's just a thing in the medium of video games, and so kind of like neither of us are. I mean, Brett's more proficient at it than I am as far as having played Demon Souls.
More proficient.
Well, you played
Demon Souls
played
all the way through.
Yeah.
However,
yeah.
I would not say I'm proficient in any way.
Yeah.
I am like you mentioned in pre-show. I am stubborn. Also, I was not employed, so there was a 2-week period where what I did for my day job and for my entertainment at night was to play Demon Souls. I probably played for 2 weeks, 12 hours a day of Demon Souls in 2014 or something.
That's how you have to do exactly it, I think.
Yeah. And that's going to be a challenge. Though, I may find time every day to play a little bit and keep on top of this one. So yeah, don't expect us to suddenly be jumping in and playing a bunch of 2011 and more recent games. Someday we may play Arkham just because Tim loves it so much, and things like that. It'd be more like, we love this game.
We'd play Asylum though, right? We wouldn't play City. So,
we wouldn't play City, which is the one. Yeah. And so.
But this is our time travel episode, maybe called. We're time traveling.
We're time traveling to 10 years from now when we're still doing this podcast, and we're like, well, I guess we should play some 2011 games now, because of how they influenced 2032. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll see how it goes. Can you imagine? That'd be like how many? That would be another 500 episodes. Oh my god, that's like when I think we've done 300. I'm like, oh my god, that's a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
So anyway, we will not be doing a ton of 2011 games. So I will at least talk about some of the 2011 games just to sort of set this in its time period. It was the year of Portal 2, which is, in fact, a lot of the games I'm going to mention, maybe almost every game I'm going to mention is a sequel. There are a couple indie titles and one new game that are not. Portal 2, Batman Arkham City, which we kind of referenced already. Uncharted 3. Which I thought was a fitting end to the series. They got me with a story moment in that one. Deus Ex: Human Revolution, L.A. Noire, which is a AAA new title at the, which was I guess from Rockstar, but developed by Bondi or something like that. I can't remember the name of the company that developed it.
It's just
with that weird face streaming system where the faces looked really realistic but couldn't move very much, and then they did some really amazing capture stuff. That really moved that forward. There was a Zelda that year, Skyward Sword, which I have for the Wii and is still in the shrink wrap. Assassin's Creed Revelations, Bastion, and Limbo are the indie titles I was mentioning. games that didn't necessarily do anything new, except maybe for the voice, the narrative devices in Bastion, but just did things with a lot of style, which in both cases, right? I mean, we've had voiceover for ages, but the way that they did it reactively to the things that you did in Bastion was cool, and Limbo just had a whole new vibe that we really hadn't seen. There's a Rayman game this year, and of course a little game by the name of Skyrim, which ties us a little bit to last week's final episode of Morrowind, our nine episode series about Morrowind.
And we still didn't get a guest, darn it.
We still didn't get a guest. I know, it's ridiculous.
Crazy that we tried people, we tried
people who still work there, and those folks are mostly like Microsoft now owns them, and they're like, hey, yeah, let's not talk to the press this year, until this game comes out, because they have one coming out in theory this year. That's not a commentary. I don't have any special information, but also there's been a pandemic while they've been building that game, so who knows? And then people who worked on it who are not there anymore, in some cases are retired entirely, hard to get hold of. It's remarkable. I mean, we may hear back someday.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of doing guests out of order, for sure. Yeah. So, I'm actually going to keep, and to be honest, I still have somebody for Bioshock that I'm working on.
Yeah.
So,
and hey, Amy Hennig, call us.
I'm going to work on that as well. I now have a new in to potentially get to her. But so anyway,
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's always good to talk to devs, and I'd have to go back and listen to some of these games. I'm sure to remember, what I was thinking about at the time, but to come up with the questions that made sense. Anyway. That was the year. Lots of other games. This was also the year that the 3DS came out, which has only kind of recently been sunset. I think they recently announced that not this year, but next year they're going to close the store for the 3DS, which is usually the point at which that hardware effectively has become obsolete. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of new titles for the 3DS now that the Switch is, the Switch for years now has been their sort of portable go-to. So I guess that's the end of that era. So I can return yours. I don't know if I'm going to get to any more games on it at this point. Though I would like to. I have a few.
Which system are you talking about?
The 3DS.
Oh, yeah.
I have your.
Right.
I have
you
your
do
3DS.
Have my 3DS, yeah. There was something that I was... Yeah, I mean, now that Metroid is on Switch, I guess I don't really need it back. But, yeah.
Metroid Dread.
That's the one I want to play, yeah.
Yep. All right. And then, I mean, all we can really say about Dark Souls and FromSoft, I mean, we are not well educated in this series or the history of FromSoft. So hold your emails about our research. We are not, we do not. When we got on the call tonight, we said, oh, yeah, I didn't look up anything about Dark Souls. Oh, yeah, what year did this come out? So that's the kind of level of research we do over here at Dev Game Club Labs.
Exhaustive.
Just really exhaustive. Easily 30 or 40 seconds on Wikipedia before we start. It was directed, of course, by Hidetaka Miyazaki, and it's a Bandai Namco title. Some earlier titles, of course, Demon Souls that you mentioned, but also Kingsfield, of which there are, I believe, a number of entries. There's sort of a vibe to their games. I also want to say that, oh my God, what's the game with the pawns? And I just it was right there.
Dragon's Dogma.
Dragon's Dogma, I believe, is the same engine as this. I'm going to actually look that up.
Was that a From Software game?
No, it was not, but it was it's Capcom. No, it's not the same engine at all. It sort of feels the same, which is really funny, which is why I thought that.
I know what you mean, because I mean, I did, like I mentioned, I did play quite a few hours of Monster Hunter World, and it there's some, it feels, I don't know. I think some of it is just design aesthetic as well, like visual design aesthetic.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what I got from, when I was playing Dark Souls over the weekend, I was like, this feels so Dragons Dogma. Like, there's just something about the way the characters are built and clothed.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like the aesthetic of what Westerners look like, I guess. Like there's something about it that just is a specific thing.
Yeah, I'm nodding. It's this one. I think there's Monster Hunter. There's another one I'm blanking on, but I don't know if this is a thing. I mean, it's got to be a thing that we're just not educated in. But I feel like Japanese developers translating, specifically Japanese developers translating Western fantasy tropes,
medieval fantasy,
it's got a specific thing, and it's like some influences. I mean, to be honest, like the knights have a sort of a shape silhouette not unlike samurai, you know what I mean? Like the armor is very like hanging armor, and like, and I know obviously they do their research and they are trying to make it accurate to medieval armor, but I don't know, there's just I like the aesthetic. The other game that I wrote down that came to mind as I was playing this, especially with the world design and the level design with the world design, is actually Shadows of the Colossus and Eco. Like it's got a starkness and a scale, like when you're standing in what's the first undead
Berg,
when you're standing like kind of high up on the berg and you look around, and you see bridges and you see towers and you see like vistas, but it's all very samey color-wise and palette-wise, but it's intricate and kind of puzzly. The world looks that way, and so I don't know. That came to mind. Yeah,
it borrows a lot, as much of video games do, and probably to some degree Dungeons and Dragons, but in specific, I'm thinking of this artist whose last name was Piranesi, Giovanni Battista Piranesi, which is also the name of a recent novel, maybe 2 years ago, Susanna Clarke. Great book, by the way. Oh, did I do a book recommendation for Morrowind? I'll have to look that up.
I don't think.
Anyway, Piranesi designed these prisons called carceri, which you'll be amused by because that's a thing in our Dungeons and Dragons campaign, or my Dungeons and Dragons campaign. That comes from this Italian artist who imagined these just Baroque, huge, the scale is enormous, like God of War owes a lot to Piranesi.
So does
but these games
Eco,
do too as well. Yeah, Eco does for sure. Eco and Shadow of the Colossus both. I mean, with just this architecture that is enormous and out of scale with humans in a way. And yeah, totally recommend. If you're not familiar with Piranesi's work, I totally recommend looking up his illustrations. They're freely available on the internet. And that sort of Baroque large scale architecture informs a lot of what we do in video games. I remember seeing it, maybe 10 years ago now, and going, oh wow, this is where this comes from. Mm-hmm. This sort of thing, because I wasn't familiar with it before then. And I definitely see that here. It's a definite style and a definite a look, aesthetic about about spaces. And it works really well with the third person, like this exaggerated architecture, because in first person, you kind of get the scale kind of naturally happens, but in third person, you actually have to make it a little bigger in a way as well, I think. Mm-hmm. So there's something great about that sort of thing. So
yeah, well, and I again, not being like uber fans like a lot of people are of From Software games, and being adjacent to them, and as we talked about, we mentioned them so much because they have had such an influence on especially combat design and kind of like I guess what I'd say spawning design or something, that I know that they're one of the studios that you can trace their lineage quite a like the Kingsfield games specifically. People often talk about seeing some of Dark Souls in there, like the Soulsiums of the world or whatever, kind of some of the paradigms, that they have. They have a thing that they have always tried to do, and I don't know, I assume there's some amount of iteration happening there that got them to Demon Souls and Dark Souls, and obviously thus that's where things blew up. But I just wanted to mention it because I think there's something to be said a little bit like maybe like Kojima as well, where they have a certain kind of game that they want to make, or at least like a space, and they don't ever leave it. They just keep doing it, whether it works or not. And it's like, I don't think it's stubbornness or whatever. It's just like probably what they like to do and what they think is useful, but it's so different. And then, one of them hits, and then you kind of like, you've powered through the iteration to the point where it becomes a success, and you found the sweet spot. And I think that that's pretty admirable because very few studios get to do that. I actually, Resident Evil, having just finished 8 myself, on the stream, like, is another good example of that for me, right? Like, I just feel like they just have constantly, not constantly, but often they have been changing things up enough. And 8 is a very, very good game. And it is very, like, you can see 4 in that game. But it's modern. So I don't know. So anyway.
Well, I appreciate you throwing shade on me having not finished 8. So thanks. That's good. That's great.
Yep, I am done. I am done. Your turn.
Yep. I've been playing Tunic, which is more of a Souls game, honestly. It's got a lot of the hallmarks of this game, with places that you go and save, like the bonfires where all the enemies refresh and come back. We'll get to that, but anyway, I mean, I think you're right. It's really funny. It's funny, and we should get to character creation, like going through the faces and haircuts and things like this. I'm like, wow, like, is this what we look like? I mean, there's just something really funny about the character creation in these games. I chose a female character. You might have as well.
Mm-hmm. I did.
You often do. I know. I often do as well, just because representation matters, I guess. But I often choose female characters. But I love that that you go and you ask, like, what's that about? And they're like, oh yeah, there's no differences. I mean, they're just like upfront. And then you look at the character faces and they're just so weird. They don't look like people that you would actually meet in 8 heads that you can pick from and then 12 haircuts or whatever. That's not really the important part. We should talk about class and stats and things like that. You picked a thief. Can you tell me why you picked a thief?
Well, because it's not something I would normally choose. I would in a situation like this, I almost always choose a ranged type character, like a bow, in this case, bow character. I am kind of on, as you might notice, I am kind of on this like thief, rogue, assassin kick right now. And so which I did for Morrowind as well. And so I'm kind of like, I'm trying to push against my normal proclivities. And in fact, actually separate from ranged character, the other kind of, I don't want to say traditional, but my understanding is that the sort of sword and board mentality of this game, like a knight or a warrior, is a pretty traditional and like not easy, but like a good way to go because it's very standard and it works well with the way the game works. And so I kind of was probably a bad idea, but I pushed against that and saying, well, what if I was not all about shield and was not all about swords? I was somebody who was maybe more nimble and had to, had better dodging and stuff. So, I mean, I don't really know if I have a good reason, to be honest, other than just wanting to pick a theme that I just kind of on a personal kick on. But like I did a cursory look over the stats when I was choosing character, but I didn't choose the character based on stats. It was more just on almost like fantasy fulfillment. It's weird because there are RPG elements obviously through this game, and it is, I guess, technically an RPG, but it's such a weird RPG, that it's like, yeah, we're picking classes, but I don't know how it works or what it means. You know,
what do all these stats mean?
I mean, we're gonna because they're non-traditional. They're not traditional Western stats, if you will, right? It's not D&D based stuff, which is
not strength, intelligence, wisdom,
which is good. I mean, that's probably part of its allure, I think, and its mystery. And I think we're going to be probably every episode we'll talk about the opacity of the game in general. So, but yeah, so why did you choose what you choose?
There's like 12 main stats, right? I mean, it's
crazy.
It's just like attunement and like endurance, and I mean, it's very strange. I picked Clarke. So the first time I played this much of this game, like I've played as much for this podcast as I originally played. When I tried this a few years ago, I think I actually streamed my first 3 hours with this game and then put it down and never picked it up again. I was like, because people were like, yeah, you're pretty stressed out when you play this game. Like, yeah, it's not really a good streaming game for me. I'm way too overwhelmed. I can't interact with the audience because I'm so focused. And if I'm not focused, I'm not playing the game well. So I picked it up and I put it down. But knowing I remembered I played a dexterity build for Demon Souls, or at least I ended up, I don't know if I picked the dexterity build, but I ended up putting a lot into dexterity because I felt like I dodged a ton in that game. And this time I was like, well, I'm going to give the shield and strength a little bit more of a go, but I also wanted to try the magic. And for me, that ended up being the cleric. Because I think the sorcerer is like more pure magic sort of thing. And I was like, I don't want to do that because I think the combat systems are worth looking at and talking about.
I can't imagine.
So I wanted some.
Yeah, what magic is like in this game.
I mean, I assume it's like stay away and shoot things from afar as much as you can.
Yeah.
Which was part of what I did, I think, with... In fact, I know it's what I did with Demon Souls because I got to the end of that game and the final boss, I remember looking up like, this guy is wrecking me. And so what I looked up was like, well, how do you beat this final boss? And you could, if you got up to like the next to the last step of the entrance into his area, you could shoot him with a bow across the arena that he was in, and sort of slowly plunk him down, and he wouldn't come after you because you didn't go on to the top step. Like, that's how I beat Demon Souls. Yeah. I'm not proud.
The cheesing factor.
But I was there. I was like, I went in and he just crushed me again and again and again. I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I looked it up and and I was like, well, I guess I can do this. Hooray, I beat the game. Like, I don't know. So this time I was like, I want to engage more with the systems, with the sort of blocking and Counter-Strike. And I'm really glad I did because I really enjoy that in play so far. And we'll talk about that when we get to that. But yeah, so I went with the cleric because
so you have a shield,
some magic. I have a shield. I have a mace, and I have a talisman. This took me a long time to figure out, which is the thing that lets me cast miracles, which are basically the cleric spells. Miracles.
Okay. I have a talisman. I have no magic right now, but I have a talisman. I did talk to that one cleric guy. Yeah, it felt like there's what's his name? There's a guy in the hub there. But
I don't know. Yeah.
Petrus?
I know who you mean, but I don't know.
I think it's Petrus.
If I don't write them down, then...
Yeah, it's Petrus. Forever. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah. So those were my choices. I didn't really know what any of the stats were going to mean. I think you then get to pick a gift. What did you pick as your gift?
Is that the item? Like you get to pick an item?
Yes, you get to pick an item.
Yeah, I picked the master key.
So did I.
Okay. Well, I'm a thief, so it made sense to me.
Well, I mean, I was just like, oh, I get to open doors? I'm like, I hate when I can't open a door.
Yeah,
so
I figured, when I chose it, I thought of you because I figured you probably would choose it too. Cause
that's why I normally play a thief or a rogue, because I hate when there are secrets I can't see. Like when I'm playing through a game, especially the 2D RPGs like Baldur's Gate or something like that, I like to have a rogue main character because I know that character will be able to find the traps and open the things. And because that's the content that you don't get to see if you don't have that. And it always drives me crazy. So I usually make that choice. Having picked a cleric, I was like, well, I guess I'm giving up thief abilities because it wasn't really clear what those were. And then it's like, oh, you can have a key that opens doors. Thank you. I'll take that. For sure. Yeah. So that was definitely my choice. I don't think that's going to open, honestly, that many doors.
Well, it's opened in the burbs. I think 3 doors I found that it opened.
Okay. That's okay.
You can also, the merchant sells keys, so I assume that's the solution.
Yeah, I bought one of those as well. Yeah. I bought the residence key or whatever it is from.
I don't think you needed to. I think the master key. I
did.
Yeah.
I mean, what did I do? I did 2 more strike cycles, from the bonfire to afford that. So it was not like a big deal. Anyway, so I guess we'll get to that as well. So the next thing is we've created this character. We've chosen a face. Is there anything else in character creation you want to address?
No. Is there
picking what you look like is very
no, it's nothing. Yeah. I mean, in fact, my character's wearing a mask anyway, so it's like I can't really see my face.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Well, if you took that mask off, you'd look like a hideous undead creature. So
right, which
is what I look like.
Yeah,
which is a whole thing. I haven't figured out. We're hollowed or something.
Yeah, that's what I'm confused by, because when you go to the bonfires, it says
you can exchange a humanity to be unhollowed.
What does that mean, though?
I don't know.
Okay, because I'm like, I don't think I
feel like in Demon Souls that if I did that, whatever that, there's something equivalent, but not exactly the same in Demon Souls. I feel like I had more hit points.
Is that where you turn into a ghost or something?
No.
Or is that does that have something to do with possessing
you end up becoming human, and your face looks normal, but I don't know what the mechanical differences are there, and they're not explained anywhere that I can see. They might be. Don't write in. We'll figure it out eventually. But
I mean, I haven't even been able to use that feature.
I go and do it, and I've found bits of humanity and made myself human, and then died again, and now I'm a hollow, undead, ugly-looking thing. And it doesn't seem to have an impact, but I feel like it's a thing where, and this is a Souls thing, I feel like it's a thing where if I talk to some people, they're going to be like, ew, or if I kill certain things while I'm one or the other, it's going to make differences in how the game plays out. But I'm just saying that kind of on my vague recollections of either people talking about it or maybe some Demon Souls thinking, but I honestly don't know. So, and that opacity is a big part of these games, when they come out. We are, both Tim and I are trying to play this without checking out what are good builds and what to invest in when with your character and all of those things at this point. I mean, we're going to be totally lost, I think, for a while. So we're not going and reading up. The manual for this game is not helpful in that regard. So there's a lot of mechanics that we're going to be kind of uncovering as we play in that sort of dealing with that sort of opacity.
Yeah, we're trying to simulate. I mean, I just remember when each of these, well, especially Demon Souls and Dark Souls, but I feel like when every one of the games comes out, there's always that week or two, that first week or two where everyone's trying to figure it out. And I've always had FOMO during those phases because I'm not playing with everybody, but it is, and the reason we're playing this game now is because of Elden Ring, and that's been happening for that game too. And I just love that they've so intentionally chosen that approach in a world where the reason we bring this up, one of the reasons we bring these games up so often is we are now in a world where there is nothing hidden from the player, right? Like games are
Right.
usable and just hand holding and nose leading and carrots and sticks and all that kind of stuff's happening. And, you know, and these folks are like, nope, that's not us. And it worked.
I mean, yeah, it worked for them. I mean, it's also a good follow-up to Morrowind, where we've sort of seen those edges sanded off in time, right? And so, I mean, certainly we've had emails where people allude to that or talk about it. I've certainly even mentioned it. It's like, yeah, these games are easier than Morrowind. You know, Oblivion and Skyrim are deliberately less opaque and more usable and have a lot of those features. And this one just steadfastly refuses to be that. You know, even though the internet is there to help you along with it, they're sort of designing to an older aesthetic, and you know, where the friction points are in your game are often the interesting bits of your game. You know, and so this is one of those games where there's a lot of interesting friction points that I'm sure we'll be talking about over the next several weeks.
Well, there's a sense
we'll see where we get.
There's a sense of exploring the game that I think we did. Yeah, it's a really good point about kind of the connection to Morrowind, because we talked about that, this sense of mystery and opacity there too. And your point about like Oblivion and Skyrim, obviously I've only played a little bit of Skyrim, but I can immediately see like this, the edges sanded down, the sort of very like handed to you on a platter sensibilities compared to Morrowind, playing those back to back. And I just think it's very, I'm kind of, I'm so happy for our medium, the fact that these games, the Souls games, have done what they are doing, and that Elden Ring specifically is doing what it's doing in such a great scale, because it's been such the norm for the last 10 to 20 years that when you do get a chance to iterate on a franchise like you do in Elder Scrolls case or what have you, then the obvious, most important thing you should be doing is to make the game more usable with each iteration, and to modernize, you know, make it. And it worked for Skyrim, obviously, because that game, you know, has had a tremendous success, and everyone and their mothers played it. So yes, it worked. But then you have arguably the Skyrim of the Souls games that just came out, didn't fall into that trap, didn't do what was expected, quote unquote, to be done. You
said trap, and so I'm going to take issue with that. I honestly think that when making Morrowind, and I haven't talked to anybody about making Morrowind, I think they wanted Skyrim, like that those were the tools that were available to them at the time. I don't think that Bethesda's goals have really changed in that regard. It's just that sort of design thinking and usability has gotten better and better to the point where they could do those things. There was like, oh, this is how you map things or whatever, to make the games more usable. I think they always wanted that. Yeah. It's just that the sort of design thinking wasn't there. And that's a different aesthetic, a different choice. And I think that FromSoft has said, yeah, but what if we took these things that were seen as sort of deficiencies in usability and just were like, you know what, that's what we do. We lean into and we're innovating on that.
I feel like we're saying the same thing, but maybe characterizing it as a trap is wrong. But I guess my point is, yeah, I agree with you that Morrowind was meant to be more usable version of Daggerfall.
Right,
et cetera, et cetera.
That's my point. Is that it keeps trying to get more usable, and I don't think that
was their goal. I don't think that was their goal. But the reason
I think that was their goal even then. Yeah. I think that if they had the design knowledge of 2011 in 2002 or whatever it was,
they would have made Skyrim
came out. That they would have made something like Skyrim.
Yeah.
Like
fair,
I don't think they were trying to not make that. Like I think a lot of what we get in feedback about that is like, oh, Morrowind was much better because XYZ. And it's like, yeah, but Morrowind would have been Skyrim if those tools were available to them at the time, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I mean, I know what you're saying, and I think that's a fair point. I guess the other way to put what I was saying, though, is maybe trap is an unfair way to put it. I don't think it's necessarily a trap, but I guess what I'm saying is there is sort of a given, I mean, we both have been there for, I think we've seen it for every game we've worked on. There's those conversations where you look at whatever if you're making a sequel, you look at the last game, or if you're making something new, you look at some competitor / influence and you say, what is the next iteration of this? And you make all these assumptions on, okay, this one thing we're talking about, shooting, running, jumping, whatever it is, we're going to do a better version of that. And we're going to make it more usable and more a broader audience, more user-friendly, because it makes sense. It's like, that is what it's kind of what it's like, why wouldn't you do that? And I guess my point, so it's not really a trap. It is kind of expected and generally a good idea. I mean, these games do well, but then I guess the thing that I just love about this whole fork in the road is that you get to Elden Ring, where seemingly they're still on the same track. And yes, they've gone open world and they've done I know they've added in some things they haven't had before. One aspect I'm actually very excited about that Dark Souls doesn't seem to have is stealth. But they didn't, when they get to that question of should we make the combat more usable in this way, whatever it might be, they said they chose not to.
Putting UI on the screen, flashing weapons or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, things that tell you what the timing is. And I really appreciate that because it does accentuate a different thing, which is the sort of player engagement with the moment to moment in a very direct way.
Well, in mastery, when you master that without the hand holding of the game helping you to master it, it's a different gratification. I mean, it's punishing, but it's different.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, it's one of those things that I feel more games could do where they could do so. And I wasn't expecting to get here in our first episode, but like the accessibility issue is like, well, why aren't there accessibility options for the Souls games? I'm not going to take a position on that. What I would say is I will. I do think you could do it and not quote unquote ruin the game or whatever. I mean, you're playing a game, you can choose to have the experience you want. That said, one of the things that I think some games have done is do a different sort of accessibility option where you can turn off helping things that make it easier to get through the game.
Kind of like racing games too. A lot of racing games turn off helpers.
I think Tomb Raider's done that too, and I think Uncharted maybe as well, where it's like you can actually literally turn off like, hey, we're not going to make all the things yellow that you can jump onto or whatever it is, or blue. And I mean, different games use different color language for that. But basically highlights to say this is a ledge you can jump to. And there's a number of those that actually make the game sort of tougher and less usable under player direction. And I think that's an interesting choice that some games have made. Actually, we played a little bit of the last Tomb Raider in the new trilogy. Yeah, Shadow. And it was that. I mean, that we had both actually made similar choices, I think, about like, actually don't give me as much of that, but this one's okay. Like, I don't care so much about that, and customizing that experience to yourself. I think these games could offer those and have the defaults be the thing. But I also see in other AAA games, people adding the sort of a reverse accessibility option to make the games more like a Souls game in some ways. So that's kind of an interesting trend that has happened.
The Souls switch. Anyway. The Souls button.
To make this more like a Souls game. Don't show me everything. I want to have the experience of figuring it all out, which is cool. And I think that's a neat thing that has kind of happened. Not every game, but never every project. But yeah,
you can give people achievements for doing it that way, and which I'm sure they do in Tomb Raider's case or whatever. But yeah, for sure. Okay, well, so we've covered one of our topics. Let's talk about the opening area, the asylum, where you've been sent because you're undead, whatever that means, and it's basically a place where they're going to send and imprison you. There's this cutscene where your character is lying in the muck with their wrinkly face, and in your case, a wrinkly mask
masked face. Somebody opens up a grate way above you and drops in a key, and you're like, oh, I guess I'm out of here. I assume that character's going to come back somehow. Who knows? Maybe he's that character you actually meet in there as well. I don't know if you met him. I assume you met him.
Oh, yeah. That's right. It could be him. Yeah.
It's not really clear. He's dressed similarly.
Yeah, it's got a suit of armor on.
He's got a plate. And you're let out, and you sort of have this weird message-based tutorialization. So are you still, I'm kind of curious, are you still getting sort of live messages on the
No, the network's down. I remember them turning it off a little while ago. Okay. For PC at least. I think they brought the servers down, yeah.
Well, I think the PS3 one's been off for an age, okay, so we're both basically playing as if not connected offline to the network.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we will not be invading each other.
I guess not. I was kind of hoping there was like a LAN way to do that or a direct connect way, but I guess there's not.
I don't think so. I think it's purely through their servers. I did have that happen a couple times when I played Demon Souls. So I've actually experienced that, but not recently. So what was that like for you? I mean, I had played one of these a fair bit before, all the way to the end before, but what was that experience for you?
I think I had played enough of Demon Souls, just a few hours of it, that I understood the concept of this. So
okay.
So yeah, I mean, it wasn't too surprising, and I don't know. I thought it was, if I put it in the context for when the servers were on and when I could get these messages from other players later, I thought it was kind of a clever introduction, not only just to what the messages are tutorializing you for, but also just of the message system itself. You know, it's like, oh, that's kind of neat, because you're going to see these in the future, and there will be essentially messages not from the developers but from players, so you will have already known what they are. So I don't know, that seems cool. I
almost feel like they at some point said, okay, these are the ones we're going to select, and this is going to be the last patch that we do for this game. And now that the servers are going down, and they just patched in the ones, because they all have the sort of mechanical stuff in them of like there's a message which are you saying those would not have been there at launch? The tutorial ones were, but I feel like there are some that they have. Maybe they were authored in there, but they have like how many upvotes they had basically, and which is the part I was saying. You sort of had that with Death Stranding, I guess, that you played.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
I mean, it was a very similar sort of mechanic.
He was definitely influenced by this stuff. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So I mean, it's like, it'll say something which is not something a user can write. They have to pick it from, I think, a list of messages, and then there's a number of likes, basically. It's not likes, but I forget what the actual thing is. But people saying, "Yeah, this was a good message," to say. So it's the tutorial ones are clearly there because they deliberately say very mechanical things like, "Oh, you can do this. Oh, this is where you can get your shield. You can roll. You can use L2 and R1 to shield, bash, and counter." So there are things that are clearly tutorialization, but then there are others that are like trap ahead, and you don't know what that means, and you see it, you might have it happen to you and kind of laugh at like, oh, well, they told me there was a trap, and that's the trap. So I don't know what they did with that. I don't know if those came from user placement or if they were placed by the developers.
I've only gotten the tutorial ones in mine. I've gotten none of the other pick from a menu ones. Yeah. Okay. I've actually seen, since I've left the asylum, I've seen no further messages.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's one difference between your game and mine then, because I'm seeing them, and I wonder if it's because I'm playing in areas that I played before, and that they're just cached on my machine.
Oh, right. Yeah, that could be. we'll have to see
which would
later
make a
on
lot
in
of
the
sense.
game.
Yeah, later on they may just fade away for me as well.
Oh, well, maybe they were there. I mean, maybe they cashed them in for the whole game for you.
That would not be my choice, but
well, there's lots of choices they've made that would not be my choice.
Fair enough. But as an engineer, I would not want to suck down a lot of bandwidth for places people haven't been yet.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'll keep an eye out. I actually assumed that you would also have those, but
no, I got nothing. In fact, there's a couple times when I would have liked to have been warned. Like, oh, there's a Black Knight right around the corner. Okay, good, thanks. I'm not going that way right now.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. Okay, so you don't have those. All right. So then I guess we'll go instead to the first boss, the Asylum Demon, who is we should probably, as part of that, talk about the sort of creature / character design, because this game is really, really sort of grotesque in some ways. Like, you see these characters at the beginning, there's this one who's made of skulls all over the place, and
the first undead
warrior,
Nito. Nito, I can remember his name.
Nito, yes, yeah, Nito, yeah, Nito. I know. They're also kind of beautiful, in a way, it's good. Which is their whole vibe, which I think is really, really great.
It's got a thing.
I am a 50-year-old man who just said vibe. So
you said vibe a few times on this podcast.
I probably have. It's embarrassing. It's a whole thing. I mean, I think that there's something that they really capture in these choices that they make, in the aesthetics, the visual aesthetics, there's a sort of majesty in a way that I think is similar to Eco or especially Shadow of the Colossus. Mm-hmm. Different choices, but a similar sort of majesty and nobility in those sort of visual aesthetic choices that they make, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's I can see how they have a it's not just the mechanics and the opacity, but there's something about their visual design that if you end up liking the style, that they're consistent with. Again, Shadow Colossus comes up. On the flip side, Resident Evil is an example of a franchise that I would say is all over the place, right? Like, sure, from game to game, like they have not, for better or for worse, they have not maintained that kind of consistency. And so it allows them to probably go further afield if they want to. But like, even if I've only watched videos of Sekiro, but it's like, that seems like a Souls game to me. Bloodborne, I know, is more cosmic horror-y and bloody, but seems like it fits in the mold too, even though they're different sort of subgenres or something. And then, Elden Ring looks like a modern version of Dark Souls to me, from what I've seen. So.
Yeah, from what I've seen as well. Yeah, it's their thing. I definitely remember reading an interview with Miyazaki some years ago. I think it was for Dark Souls 2, where they had a the artist who had done work on a dragon had made it sort of dripping and gory, and and he said, it's really gross and everything, but it's not majestic, it's not sad, and it's not like, you don't feel the sort of horror of being this powerful creature who had a soul and now is this thing, this dead thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I should.
There's like a moroseness to it.
Yeah, there's a thing that he's trying to get at, that it's kind of sad that these things are what they are now, and and it's not their fault. It's that there's something really. Yeah, it's a whole thing, and I'll try to track that down, because that was one thing that struck me. It's one of the few things I've read about the series that I've retained anyway. and I thought it really got at sort of what these games feel like. I probably looked up stuff around when I played Demon Souls, which was, like I said, probably around 2014, and and I just was like I was really struck by like, oh, this person's trying to do something very different from what a lot of the rest of us do. When I read that quote, it had a very different sort of specific approach. So I'll try to track that down.
So what about the first boss? I mean, I liked how they introduced him as you're going down that first hallway, and he's like stomping around through the window. You know, you can see him and you hear him like conk, conk, stomp, 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 and then you eventually get to him. But I didn't find the door right away to leave, so I was actually I was fighting him for a while. I was trying to like, wow, this game is punishing. They really want me to fight this boss right now, and I'm doing like 2 points of damage with my the thing I had was a broken sword.
The broken sword
hilt. Oh, did you have the same thing?
I had the same thing. Yeah. Although, I guess if you get past him, then you get your more. I assume you got a different weapon later.
Yeah, I got a dagger. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a mace.
Yeah.
So there is like, character specific placement that happens later. I mean, I having played a few hours of this once before, I was like, oh, I know. I didn't remember how, but it's like, I'm pretty sure you want to run from him right away. And I'm like, I think there's, so I went into that area and I was like dodging around on one side of the room, which turned out to be the right one because it was, or the correct one, I should say, because it was on the left side and and I just was like rolling around and there's a door. I'm like, oh, I'm getting out of here. So I did okay. I assume it's possible though to take him out there.
Isn't that a thing with these games where there's oftentimes you can get to bosses way earlier than you should, and there's like a badge of honor.
There's a badge of honor for sure. I mean, there's people who play I forget what the class is. There's a class that's naked.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no armor and no special abilities, and I think there are people who will choose those things for. I'm sure some meta reason, but also just people will play these games and be like, oh yeah, I played with a level 1 club in my underwear through the whole game and beat it. Those people are out there. I'm not one. I'm going to level shamelessly to get past things if I need to. And I will need to, but yeah, so I kind of had a vague idea, like, this is like, I can't take this thing down now. I got to get away. And I just didn't. That was just a vague memory from a few years ago when I tried it. So how many times do you think you died to him there?
Probably like 5 times or something like that before I kind of like.
I think that was my experience the first time I played as well, where it's just like, what is going on with this game? I'm like, I played the other one, but it wasn't like this. Like, it was a long time before I got to a boss, because my recollection of Demon Souls is it doesn't start with a killing thing like this. I know a lot of them since have, maybe all of them since have, but I could be wrong. I may be misremembering.
No, I think you're right. Because I did play the first couple bosses in Demon Souls, and the first like big boss is a fair amount in, I think.
Yeah, that was my recollection. Yeah. You had to make your way around to get a key to open a door and then face something bad, and I didn't remember this sort of approach of like, oh yeah, walk into the first big room and get clobbered.
Yeah, which I think is a bold move, because I mean, obviously, because it's cool. Because bosses are such a thing, right? Like, they want to scare you right away.
Yeah,
they want you to know, like, no, we're serious.
And beating one of these is a big deal.
Yeah.
Also, right?
Yeah. Plunge. Holy crap! I just thought of something.
What?
I wonder if you can use the plunge attack on the Taurus demon.
Right, because you can get up on
the thing. I didn't even think of doing that.
Oh, I might try that.
You should try that.
Because I haven't got past it, and you have.
You should try that. Yeah, I did a different approach and didn't get it past him. But oh man, They taught you. It was right there in the first boss.
He looks the same. He looks very similar. He doesn't have wings, I guess, but he's very similar in kind of like a floppy belly, big size. He's very similar, kind of overall shape, silhouette, I guess, language, and what he does. He's got that big club.
Yeah, he swings the club, and there's a lot of similar pacing to it. Boy, if that works, keep me posted. I wish I would have thought of that.
I will try that. I will try that tonight. Because now I'm like, I mean, that's one thing that's funny. We were talking about this in pre-show, is like that both of us you ended up playing twice as much as I did. You said 6 hours.
6.5 hours, yeah. I was planning on playing 3, which we roughly talked about, and I just kept going. I just would not give up. I would not give up. But I luckily had the time, which isn't often the case. But
yeah. You're welcome. I gave it to you.
That's true. That was largely thanks to you.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think that's as far as we can get in terms of topics. We're almost at an hour already. We should start turning to reviews and email. We had like 5 other topics that we're like, oh yeah, we should talk about this time. But we'll get to those next week. I need to take a quick break, so we'll come back and take emails. And I do have a singing review.
Yeah, oh boy. Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. It has been a while, sir, since we have had one of our patented singing reviews.
Mm-hmm.
But we are lucky, and for weeks we've been building up to me finally singing this review for Mystery Dip, which we really appreciate. I'm sorry, Mystery Dip, it's taken me so long. Tim, you may get the song just because you have heard it recently, I think. You may make a connection here while you're listening that others will not have. But I'm actually, I have to play the song in the background. Only I will be able to hear it, so that I can match up the rhythms of the song. I do this sometimes for these. But let's see if you can pick this one out. I think you're going to come up with it pretty quick, and I think Mystery actually matched it pretty well. It's not the 4 minutes or whatever of the other song. It's just a couple of verses, but it's pretty good. So you ready?
I'm ready.
I mean, I know you're not really ready.
No, I'm not. I'm never ready, really. But,
but ready as you'll be. All right, here it comes. Here it comes. I'm getting the intro music here. Life is like a game that you're playing on when it's new one day and the next day gone. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you bounce off the game you choose. There's a world inside every darkened door of game different choices made before, where the brave code free and designers soar. Come here with me to find out more. They won't hesitate to play through Baldur's Gate or other games of the past. I love this podcast. I want to hear it all night long. If you're into old games, you'll want to hear it all night long. From giant worlds to just a town, it's in my blood and it's all around. I love games now like I loved them then. It's a newer screen, but the same old hands. From Azeroth to Arabian Nights, dodge a sword swing or a blaster's light. Knock me down and game over again. Restore a save at the boss's den. There's no game they can't load. Some edges rough, this they know. I like to hear when guests come on with tales of survival. I love this podcast. I want to hear it all night long. If you're into old games, you'll want to hear it all night long. And that's what we got.
Yay!
Thank you very much. That took me a while to get to that. There's did you actually hear that from the Friday Slack channel?
Oh, that's what you were talking about. Oh, right. No, I did not.
Little behind the scenes. I do dumb Slack music videos where I show new features in the game we're working on, or just dumb things that I've done, and I set them to music. And this was the one I actually set it to on Friday, because I was like, I gotta hear this song. Gosh darn it, for Mystery Dip. So thank you for that singing review, Mystery. It was a long time coming, but I finally got around to it.
Well done.
I've been saying again and again. So.
Good lyrics too. He did a good job there.
Yeah, he did a great job, actually. The rhythm's quite good. He actually sent in his own version.
Oh, really? Wait, yeah. Of him singing?
Of him singing.
Oh,
so
amazing.
Maybe I'll put that after the outro music, so that you can compare. I'm sure people will prefer his, because mine is terrible.
That's funny.
Anyway,
good job, Mystery. Well, he came on. We were talking about the song on one of the streams, because he was on, and we were talking about when you're going to do it and stuff, and he was explaining to everybody what the song was, or he's trying to give hints, I think, or something.
Yes,
but yeah, if he's up for it, we should put it on there.
I mean, I think he literally said in the email, like, hey, if you're not going to get around to it, then here's one to use. So
nice.
He did a really good job. So very much appreciate that. Yeah.
That's a fan.
I will fund it. Yep. That is a fan who sings his own review. I mean, that's pretty great.
That's above and beyond. Yeah.
So, all right, let's turn to email. These were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. You, sir, have the first one. We still got some Morrowind ones. That's mostly what we'll be getting to this week, and probably even into next, let's be honest. Go ahead.
Morrowind's Best Merchant and Notes on Books from Jafool. Hey, guys. I'm surprised it wasn't said earlier, but it probably speaks to the great crowd you've cultivated in this podcast for people mostly not ruining things for you two. But you're ending now, and I think this underscores things you may not see regardless of how long you play. There is a way to sell slightly more expensive items. There's a hidden merchant that has 10k gold, and only one person vaguely references them of their own will. It's a mud crab east of Vivek? Really?
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about this last week a little bit.
Oh, I missed it. Okay. Or I forgot. Yes, I said that correctly.
You forgot, because we definitely talked about it.
Okay, a mud crab that you can talk to and spell and sell things to. Another character named something like the Liar will admit it exists afterwards and says mud crabs are taking over everything. And I think you mentioned the process of selling items to a merchant, then buying it back the next day to give them more gold. Also, not directly related, I wanted to mention Brian David Gilbert. When he used to work for Polygon, he did a series called Unraveled, in which he unravels mentally while unraveling topics for games. He actually read all 337 books in Skyrim, totaling 581 pages or 316,000 words. And even gave a top 5 list. Obviously, he didn't enjoy some, so please don't think me rude or trying to dunk on devs. He just makes a silly, fun video. But Brett will be happy to know he's not alone. Even BDG sneaks in a message that most people won't enjoy most books. It's obviously about what the player likes. I just share because I think his videos in general are very entertaining. Thanks again for all the fun, Jafool. That's hilarious.
It's amazing. Yeah, I actually have watched that. I have no idea. I don't remember what books he liked. He's also a person who figured out and put all the Zelda games into the Zelda timeline. From the Historia, whatever that thing was that they came out with. He literally went
beforehand?
through. I don't know if he did it in concert, but he kind of did it game by game, and then as he went through the history of the games, he inserted them in, which was extremely funny from that standpoint. It's because Ocarina being the time split.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It is ridiculous.
I've looked at that timeline.
It's extremely entertaining, and he just like talks about it and like everything. And then he also did all the Halo novels. He read all the Halo novels.
That's that guy. I remember him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's very entertaining. So I've watched.
That's a bold move.
It's a lot. I remember watching that and being like, I can't believe there's this much Halo. Like, I was entirely blown away. What did we have? 2 novels for Republic Commando? Maybe. Was it 2? 3. Was it even just 1?
No,
was it a trilogy?
Well, it depends.
Might have been a trilogy.
Yeah. There was an Imperial Commando book, I believe.
Okay. All right. So there are three sort of related books. Okay. Yeah. And I was like, that felt like a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, Morrowind, I think, has only had the one, as somebody referenced in last week's mail about
Elder Scrolls.
Umbra. Yeah, the Elder Scrolls only had the one tie-in book, and this.
No, Halo has way more than people realize, for sure.
Way more
Trust
than I
me.
realized. That's
it's
yeah. Did you have to read them?
Well, I didn't. Obviously, I didn't have to read any of them if I didn't want to, but I did read a handful when I started working there, and I had read one ahead of time, I think, or I just before I even knew I was going to work there. But you have Frank O'Connor, and you have people who are masters and have even written some of them there, so you have resources. But
right, you
kind of, I don't know. For me, being a lore nerd and also wanting to do a good job, I did want to make sure I had a good handle on things because we're cracking story for the game, so I better kind of know what I'm talking about to some degree.
I mean, when I started at LucasArts when we were making Starfighter, I read the first 2 or 3 Rogue Squadron books.
Yeah, and then you were done.
Yeah, and I was like, first of all, like they're not good. I mean, it's the stories are fine, like the plots are fine. It's just they're hack work, right? They're not well written, and I'm not trying to throw shade, on whoever the writer was. They're just not. It's just not good writing. I mean, it's fine, it's serviceable, and if you're really into the thing, yeah, it's pulp. Pulp is a good way to put it. And I definitely remember being like, yeah, I don't know why people read these. I wanted to get out the sort of like, what are the cool moments of a space flight shooter thing. But
lore reasons. That's why people read them. Lore reasons.
That's right.
I mean, the series that I'm not proud of that I've mentioned on the podcast before that I've read almost all of them is the Warcraft books, and there are more of those than the Halo books.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very
lore.
I'm concerned, honestly. I'm
D&D books are pretty high up there too.
Yeah, that's true. And the Drizzt books are a little bit better, but they're still not great. So anyway, I will take the second email. This is one from Zimmy Finger, who we've definitely heard from before. And the subject is, and I'm sorry, I've been meaning to read this for a while, and somehow I think it dropped below some others that are just like, I need to reply to these. But this subject is, I made a game.
Oh.
Hello, Brett and Tim. Might want to read this off air as it's about a personal project. So I'm very happy to be added to the list of listeners who made a game. Basically, I walked around and took pictures of a mountain. With these images, I made a Myst-like game. And wow, this podcast was especially helpful. I think what really hurt was my 1-week prototype for the longest time was the most fun version of the game. Oh, wow. So it's like holding up a mirror. And it was like dozens of iterations just to finally match it. I kept trying to add features and mechanics that just kind of took away from the idea. Some things I kept thinking about. 1, games don't want to be made. 2, make sure the player is having fun, not the dev. 3, playtest, playtest, playtest. It really is amazing how fast playtesting can answer a question. Like, for maybe a month, I was working on a rather complex mechanic, and in one session, I watched in horror as the player struggled to even understand what was going on and why. It was very easy to drop that feature after seeing that. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you again for this podcast. He did send us along a link. It's a free download from Itch.io, and I will put that in the show notes.
Amazing.
I have not had a chance. I think actually originally I was like, oh, I want to get a chance to try this out before I mention it. And then tonight I came across it and I was like, no, God, I forgot about this email, and let me just do that. And so I'll try to get to playing it this week myself. But Zimmy, well done. You made it through the fact that games hate to be made. So congrats.
Yes, that's amazing. Congratulations. I think they might have actually mentioned that on one of the streams too. They come on occasionally, but
sure.
Oh, that's amazing. Yes, congratulations. I love it. That's a great concept of taking a picture of a mountain, like using a landmark of some kind to make that.
Yeah, I mean, just last year, maybe 2 years ago, there was a mountain. There was a game about hiking around a mountain called A Short Hike that was a very, very big kind of indie game. Mm-hmm. Like a game that when people played it, they were like, "Oh man, this is amazing!" So it is a really good kind of, central localized thing to build around. So I look forward to checking it out, Zimmy, and thanks for writing in. All right, sir, why don't you take the next one?
Okay, Morrowind from Darren. Hi guys, just wanted to say I'm absolutely loving hearing about your adventures in Vardenfell. The game blew me away when I played it all those years ago. I was just in awe of the sheer size of the map and the vast scope of things you could do. I really appreciated all the work you had to do to figure out how to complete a quest. There are no waypoints or hand-holding. I enjoyed working it out myself. I love the latter Elder Scrolls games as well, but they did make them a little less challenging with all of the waypointing they give you. Which brings me to my next topic. With the release of Elden Ring, oh man, this is quite an appropriate email.
This is why I included this one tonight. I don't normally I normally just reply to and we don't read on the air like, hey, you should play this game. But because it was like, hey, you're playing Morrowind, you should play this other game, that I included this one tonight.
Yeah. Okay, so which brings me to my next topic. With the release of Elden Ring, I was wondering if you guys would consider a playthrough of one of the most influential, often imitated but never duplicated games of all time, Dark Souls. I would love to hear it discussed from your perspective and share your thoughts on design, the bosses, difficulty, and how it's affected the gaming industry as a whole. Well, got news for you, Darren. This is happening.
Good news. Good news.
I hadn't read this email, but I'm glad we're doing it now. I'm really enjoying Elden Ring, and maybe you could throw in a bonus episode to share your thoughts on that as well. I think Elden Ring will go down as one of the all-time greats, just like Dark Souls. To wrap back around to Morrowind, Elden Ring gives me that same feeling of discovery, sense of wonder, danger, and excitement to see what's around the bend or in the next cave. I love how it doesn't hold your hand and rewards patience and exploration. I know there are many who say it should be easier, but I'm really of the mind that not all games have to be for everyone. There are so many games out there now for every taste, skill level, and play style. I think it's okay if From wants to keep their games challenging. What are your thoughts? Sorry for the long-winded email. I love your podcast and hope you keep them coming for years to come. Darren, Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, I already mentioned the accessibility issue. I don't think that this game would be harmed by having some accessibility options. I really don't. I think in general, people don't. I mean, so if what you want from a game is like overcoming the challenge, that's one type of fun. But as Todd Howard would often say to us at Bethesda, fun does not mean challenge. Like, it's not the same thing. There are players who find fun in different ways. And that's what we're about as an industry. I mean, that kind of entertainment. And I don't think it has to be the one thing. I think for people who do love that, absolutely make the thing that. But it's, and maybe even make that the default. But it's okay to be able to dial that back. I've been playing Tunic, which, as I mentioned on my stream, was it feels more Dark Souls to me than it feels Zelda, though it definitely has elements of each. And I was playing and Calamity came on and said, hey, you should just turn on God mode so you can get through the enemies. I'm like, well, I want to get a little bit better at the enemies so I know what's going on. And it turns out at that point I had not figured out a very crucial leveling mechanic that was kind of obscured, but it's part of its whole deal is that the manual is given to you piecemeal and is also in a unintelligible language. And there's some pictures, and I hadn't really understood something in there. Anyway, and overcoming that with some hints from Calamity was like a real revelation. I was like, oh, this is this game. Like this game is different than I thought, and now it sort of like changed my whole context for play. And that was an enjoyable experience for me. But I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who would find that enormously frustrating and annoying. And I just spent whatever $20-$30 on this game or whatever it is, and like, ugh, So I don't know. It's a quagmire. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I mean, to his question on what do we think about from sticking to their guns and keeping the game challenging? Like, I mean, every time one of their games come out, people complain about the difficulty. And I think it's interesting.
It's a good marketing technique at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's meant to, I think that I agree with him. I don't think that they should back down. I think if they want to keep their games challenging, fine. A point of clarity, when you're mentioning accessibility, you're meaning the big A accessibility,
yes.
versus say usability. So just for the audience, in case people are, we're talking about allowing.
I'm not talking about waypoints. I'm not talking about waypointing and like putting a ton of UI on the screen to make things visible and like that's not what I'm talking about. I think
differently abled people being able to play the game.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which they've gotten flack for and have tried to stick to their guns on, but. If you just look at the front ends, the menus of those games, at least Dark Souls, it's like, yeah, they're like 10 years behind on their main menu. So
at least
they could even just make that, so I don't really think they have much of a leg to stand on when it comes to accessibility, because if you want the difficulty, if there's a version of the game that is the one they want, you play that one, and then it's a game about bragging rights anyway, so it's like, okay, so you played it with none of that stuff on, like it should be fine. It feels like but anyway, but all that being said, taking the accessibility issue separate for a second, completely agree. There should be a place for Elden Ring, and I mean, he Darren probably wrote this not long after it came out, but clearly it doesn't seem to matter because that game is doing so well.
Gangbusters.
Like people are playing it that would never play, and so some of it is the sort of zeitgeist of it, I'm sure, right? And people in FOMO and all that. So I'm sure some of it, like people are playing for an hour and like, oh crap, this wasn't what I thought it was. This is too hard. And oh, why is it so hard? I thought it was going to be Witcher or something. So there's that, but still, yeah, I mean, I agree with him. I think any medium needs that sort of variety, right? There can't be a small set of ways to do something.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that there's a sort of similar thing that happened in the 20th century with filmed animation, that Disney became what animation looked like. There was this one style, and you had to go to the I forget what there was a showcase for animation that was different every year. It's like Mike's.
I remember that. Yeah, Mike and
was it like Mike and Ike? It was like something like that. But it was
that's the candy. But I remember.
Yes, that's the candy. But it was something like that, right? And it was like these showcases of animation that looked different from the Disney style, and what you could do with animation that Disney couldn't do. And I think that's a sign of a really vibrant medium. I think that the indie, movement of the last couple of decades really allows that to continue to flourish, that, not every game has to look like, Ubisoft or EA games or whatever, like that's the sort of big AAA sort of trends, and I think that's good and awesome, and I'm glad that there's somebody working at AAA, in FromSoft that is also doing that. I think that's terrific, because I think a very narrow view of was it Spike and Mike?
Spike and Mike, that was it.
That was it, right? Yeah.
Now that's just called Nickelodeon and Adult Swim.
Exactly, right? I mean, it finally broke through and they found a place to put all that stuff. But yeah, but yeah, I think that it's really, really important to have not one thing. I mean, because a medium stagnates when it's one thing. If Disney was the only way animation could look, eventually people would get bored. And then, sooner or later, Pixar came along and was like, oh, animated movies could look like this. And then Disney animation tried to do that, but they really, it wasn't really their thing. And they kind of found their own way and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Plus there's like the Book of Kells and like a whole different aesthetic with that. Plus, Hayao Miyazaki. And I mean, it's good to have variety in whatever the medium is. And I think that's the really important thing. With games, it's the gameplay aesthetic. And I love that there's a Souls aesthetic. Even though I don't have the stamina, to put it that way, to play them often. So
nice.
So, yeah. All right, I'll take this last email since you're not streaming tonight and since we're over time for you anyway. The subject is the craziest friggin' thing, small side quest spoilers from Logan. So I'll preface this by saying we actually heard this from somebody else as well, and we've already read that one, but I figured Logan should get his time in the sun as well. That was maybe the wrong choice of phrase. Hi, Brett and Tim. I wanted to tell you the story of that time I woke up as a vampire.
That's just the best opening of an email.
That's a pretty good email, yeah. Now, it's been about 20 years since I played Morrowind. I may get some details wrong, but it feels important to recount the event as I remember it. One day, while going about a humdrum Thieves Guild quest, my Dunmer mage fell asleep in a cave to refresh a little HP and arose as a creature of the night. I was a little startled. I thought, maybe I'd made a mistake by sleeping here? Was it a scripted event like the Dark Brotherhood assassins? So I reloaded a save, went outside, found a safe enough spot to sleep, and woke up again as a vampire. I reloaded an even earlier save. About 15 minutes pass. Again, I'm a vampire.
Oh.
And I'll say now, I'm a vampire, man. Back off. That's just an ongoing thing I've got going. Now, what I didn't know then, but learned later, is that vampires can infect you through combat. Whoa, where'd it go? You can easily cure it early on, but after enough time passes, you will become a vampire. None of my prior saves were early enough, so, to echo Brett, I guess this is my life now. I'm Dracula. There's a few things you should know about the Nosferatu lifestyle. Which is a phrase I love.
Yeah, that's a new reality show.
That's a thing. You'll get increased strength and can jump insane distances, but you'll be weak to sunlight and need to occasionally feast on the blood of others. Wow. I mean, but for the grace of God. Most importantly, you can no longer ride the Silt Striders, meaning if you wanted to go somewhere, you're walking. You can cure your vampirism by asking around town, assuming the locals speak to you, but like many quests in Morrowind, the directions are vague and will take you across every corner of the world map. So to recap, my easygoing, run-of-the-mill Thieves Guild campaign has just been replaced by a mandatory, hardcore survival sim. This is my life now. Really, your unlife. But what followed was an epic weekend-long journey to reclaim my humanity. By day, I slept in caves. At night, I jumped across mountains and snuck into homes to feed on the sleeping citizens. Shops refused to sell to me, so I stole supplies and made do with whatever I found. Since resting no longer restored health and potions were hard to scrounge, a bad fight could leave me hobbled for hours until I found a vulnerable enough victim. I felt like Frodo returning the One Ring to Mount Doom. This is my life now. While eventually I did finish my quest and return to my old life of stealing 50 coins from the local bank or whatever, the impression of this event has never really left me. I don't know if anyone believes me when I tell them about it, but it remains the craziest friggin' thing I've experienced in a game. Best, Logan.
Wow.
And he adds a PS, which I mean, we had already heard about the vampire thing, but I will say Logan, very colorfully described. His PS is, if you visit the northern edge of Morrowind, you will find a Khajiit named Make. It's M''AIQ. Make? I don't know. Make the Liar stranded on a small island. Most of what he says is nonsense, but eventually you'll get a quest entry about a sunken temple off the western shore.
Whoa. Spend
a couple hours exploring the ocean floor, and you'll find a decapitated statue head that speaks to you.
What?
He's a fallen Daedric prince, and he wants you to rebuild his temple. Contract an architect, wait a few days, and the restored Temple of Boethia will stretch out before you on the coastline. This quest remains the second craziest friggin' thing I've ever experienced in gaming, which is pretty friggin'
that
cool,
is,
I have to say.
Yeah, that's incredible. Oh my god. You did quite a bit, but like, I just scratched the surface of that game. Like, that's just.
I also feel like I just scratched the surface. And actually, I mean, that's one of the things that, I mean, people give Skyrim a hard time for being, and Oblivion, for being sort of like, you know, the edges sanded off and all that stuff and less friction and blah, blah, blah. But a lot of those things are more accessible. A lot of that really weird stuff to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you can just come across it and you can experience it, and you still have to deal with it. Like, it's still the thing to figure out. Like, you can become a vampire.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And you can dive into that and be like, you know what? I want to be a vampire lord. And I think that's in the DLC. But I mean, it's those sorts of things are true everywhere. You know, joining the Assassin's Guild is the whole thing. And, you know, going to weirder and weirder temples and getting all the, I don't know, dragon priests masks and they're all just sort of these strange things that are a little easier to do, but they're just strange. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's cool that it's easier to do. I mean, I know this isn't what you're saying, but like, and that more people will see them. And so, but the fact that they are harder to do or find, or so opaque in Morrowind, when you do find them, it makes it more unbelievable to me. You know, the fact that...
I would say it makes it more unbelievable to hear about it. But like, when you're actually playing them, it feels just as strange and weird.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like there's like a ghost horseman or something in Skyrim that I can remember. I think Todd mentioned, he was like, yeah, I came across this thing that I had not seen, you know, where I just near such and such city or town at night, I found this ghost horseman and I just followed him and he went to his grave. And then in the morning I dug it up and I got a cool sword or whatever. And that was a really cool moment. And like, that's still a cool moment.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not like anybody points you to those things. Those things can still happen and the game still be easier, you know, more usable, etc. So like, I think there's still a way. And, you know, I think the needle swings back and forth on the games is like, yeah, okay, maybe you're showing me a little bit too much, or, you know, maybe you're giving me a little bit too much help. I'm not feeling like I discovered it on my own, but those things are still there to discover for the people who put in the crazy hours. And for people who don't want to put in that time, I get it. Like, yeah, you just want to have a good time after work or whatever. That's also cool. And here it is. Have fun. Mm-hmm. So I'm really back and forth about the whole thing. So.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it in various series. We talked about it with WoW Classic as well, you know, and
yeah.
There's a lot of, you know, just discovering things out there that, yeah. I mean, I don't know, you know, I don't know if we'll doing a bonus episode with Elden Ring seems like quite a step, but But the stories that I'm hearing about that particular game, because it's open world, and the fact that, you know, finding hidden bosses and you know, stumbling into caves that end up being a sort of a whole thing that you don't, and the fact that it isn't, you know, versus Witcher 3, which everyone knows is a favorite of mine, you know, which is like they point you in the direction of everything if you want to find it. Like, I don't really think there's not much hidden in that game. Even though there's a lot to do, and there's still surprising things. Like I can go to a question mark and find something there that is surprising to me and like, wow, that's crazy. But because it's a question mark on the map, I know it's more possible to find or something, you know, and finding something that isn't on the map from a UI perspective is just so intriguing to me. Because it's like, I feel more like I found it. Like the fact that that temple is, that he just gave that story example, and that temple is actually built, and you actually, you know, it's a physical thing that happens. Like, I almost don't believe him. I feel like that he made that story up. It's like
he could have. Boethia, I'm pretty sure, is the thing in Demon Souls. I think it's Boethia. So I'm like, is he just trolling us?
I mean, a talking statue head at the bottom of the water. It's like, come on, that's not a thing.
That's Murray from Curse of Monkey Island.
Yeah.
Could be anything, really. I don't know, Logan. You know, Pixar didn't happen. Yeah. No, I definitely get it. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think usability and like it's a whole thing. I mean, I think of Kingdom Hearts, honestly, because you know, you and I we played Kingdom Hearts, and I went and found all the extra bonus bosses.
Yeah.
And that was a really that honestly is the thing that changed how I felt about Kingdom Hearts. Not my life, but it changed how I felt about Kingdom Hearts a lot, because I was like, oh my God, this actually is a Final Fantasy game in some ways, right? You know, in a way that it hadn't felt like before that. Like there's these obscure, hard to find, weird, difficult experiences that are totally not signaled in any way. Like, and finding those, I mean, I played them both on the PS2 and the PS4 or whatever. I mean, I played that game like 3 times in the time you played it once when we played that series, because that's what grabbed me. And so I get that that's what grabs people. It's that weird friction. But I also, at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but a lot of games I'm perfectly happy to have no friction to just kind of chill with. So yeah, depends what you're looking for. So
yeah. Oh,
yep.
Games,
video games. They will continue to confound us, and we will continue to read your emails. Thank you. Those were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com, and thank you for the singer review. Sorry it took me so long, Mystery Dip, but you know, I want to ride that review all night long, so I appreciate it. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
We are also occasionally streaming. I know you are taking a break of a couple of weeks now. We will see if you actually come back to play Bloodborne like you promised at twitch.tv.
It wasn't a promise. Like, let's...
Promise. I'm pretty sure there was a blood oath involved, and maybe a demon will come up to eat your soul if you don't fulfill it. I have been playing Tunic at twitch.tv/BrettDuville. I'm nearly at the end. I'm sort of like, I play sometimes on stream and sometimes off, and I sort of come back and like, and this is where I am now. I'm pretty close to finishing that game. There's one puzzle that is just stymieing me, so you may see me there this week, or I may be on there playing Dark Souls. We'll see how it goes. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo, of course, is by Mark Garcia. Have fun returning to the bonfire again, and again, and again, and again this week, and good night.
Good night.
Life is like a game that you're playing on, when it's new one day and the next day done. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you bounce off the game you choose. There's a world inside every darkened door of game dev choices made before, where the brave code free and designers soar. Come along with me to find out more. They won't hesitate to play through Baldur's Gate and other games of the past. I love this podcast. I want to hear it all night long. If you're into old games, you'll want to hear it all night long. From giant worlds to just a town, it's in my blood and it's all around. I love games now like I loved them then. It's a newer screen but the same old hands. From Azeroth to Arabian Nights, dodge a sword swing or a blaster's light. Knock me down and game over again. Restore or save at the boss's den. There's no game they can't load, an edge so rough this they know. I like to hear when guests come on with tales of survival. I love this podcast. I want to hear it all night long. If you're into old games, you'll want to hear it all night long. I love this podcast. I want to hear it all night long. If you're into old games,